I always longed for a simple, ordinary family while growing up in foster care. Despite having foster parents as a child, there were no blood ties, and the desire for a family of my own, complete with a loving husband and adorable children, persisted. When a kind-hearted man proposed to me, I was elated, thinking I could finally build the ordinary family I had always dreamed of. However, my optimism proved to be misguided. My husband, Stephen, turned out to be far from the ideal partner. After a long day at work, he callously ordered me around, demanding that I make dinner for my mother and Betty. Only moments after stepping through the door, I found myself trapped in a situation where my in-laws never considered cooking, leaving me, Mary, with the burden of this less-than-ideal family. At 31, I worked for a large corporation where Stephen was also a co-worker. We had met at the same company, both graduating from college in the same year. It's important to note that Stephen, at 32, was currently unemployed. A dispute with his boss in the sales department led him to quit his job. Despite his claim that the boss was cold-hearted, I knew the real story. Even though we were married, we worked in different departments. I dedicated myself to the general affairs department, earning the trust and respect of my colleagues. During this time, the sales department manager approached me for advice, revealing that Stephen had suddenly resigned. Shocked and unaware of the situation, I learned about Stephen's irresponsible behavior at work. According to the sales manager, Stephen would casually leave work even with unfinished tasks, burdening his colleagues with overtime work. When confronted, he falsely claimed that we shared housework and insisted on leaving work on time, using his family situation as an excuse. His stubbornness and refusal to reflect on his behavior led to him quitting, leaving behind a trail of stress and dissatisfaction among his colleagues. While Stephen's departure was a relief, the sales manager expressed his honest thoughts, labeling Stephen as arrogant and a burden to the department. Apologizing profusely, I couldn't help but feel guilty about the situation that unfolded. I sincerely apologized for the disruption caused in the sales department. The understanding sales department manager reassured me that the blame did not lie with me. He expressed his disdain for Stephen, who impulsively quit his job without consulting his wife, making baseless claims about housework and family health. Contrary to Stephen's assertions, I handle all the housework, and my mother-in-law and sister-in-law are in good health. The manager, upon hearing my side of the story, sympathized and acknowledged the challenges. Consequently, Stephen found himself unemployed, convinced he would quickly secure a new job. However, the harsh reality of the job market led to continuous rejections. Stephen harbored resentment towards his previous boss, believing he had sabotaged his job search by speaking ill of him. I can vouch for the integrity of my company, asserting that such practices are not in our ethos. Despite the customary practice of serving notice for at least a month after submitting a resignation, Stephen defiantly slammed his resignation letter on the manager's desk and left the same day. It became apparent to me that Stephen's unreasonable actions would make it difficult for him to find employment elsewhere. Despite receiving a small severance pay, he chose to give it to his mother and sister. Raised in a single-parent family after his father's departure, both his mother and sister were capable of working, but chose not to. I bore the financial burden and handled all responsibilities at home. When I requested Stephen's assistance, he responded with anger, insisting that I prioritize his mother and Betty, considering them my precious family. This illogical demand led to heated arguments. Betty, 7 years younger than Stephen, took advantage of his generosity, constantly seeking pocket money. When I refused, Stephen resorted to a part-time job managing a warehouse for a courier service. He propagated a false narrative, claiming he left his major corporation job due to family sickness. This deception fueled Betty's dating expenses, while she avoided any form of work. Frustrated by my mother-in-law stealing money from my wallet, I confronted Stephen, only to face his anger. My mother-in-law belittled me, mocking my background of growing up alone in foster care, labeling me as wicked. Amidst this challenging family dynamic, a transformative encounter unfolded. Returning home with groceries one day, I discovered unfamiliar, large-sized men's sneakers at the entrance. Expecting a guest, I was surprised to find a young man with a tall stature, handsome face, and light brown hair. Initially assuming he was Betty's boyfriend, he apologized for dating Betty and exhibited unexpected politeness, a refreshing change in my otherwise dismal daily life. Spontaneously, I inquired of the young man, who was preparing to leave in his sneakers, "What's your name?" "I'm Betty's sister-in-law, Mary." Upon introducing myself, the young man looked up, offering a slight smile. Despite his initial appearance as a player, he exuded intelligence. After finishing lacing up his sneakers, he introduced himself as Jack, revealing that he worked as a bartender. According to him, Betty was a regular at the bar where he worked. Jack shared that Betty had confessed to him, and although he was initially willing to accept, he ultimately declined. The reason being that Betty had revealed her true nature under the influence of alcohol, confessing that all the money she possessed came from Stephen's part-time job. She described her sister-in-law as stingy and ugly, complaining about being made to work and do house chores. Expressing deep regret for not recognizing a good woman due to his inexperience, Jack explained that he couldn't leave the intoxicated Betty alone. He sent her home, even covering the taxi fare. At the time, neither Stephen nor my mother-in-law were at home, so Betty, in her intoxicated state, gave Jack our house key. He carried her to the living room, assuring me that he didn't steal anything. Jack mentioned that he studied at a vocational school during the day and worked as an apprentice bartender at night. Betty had called him after school, falsely claiming to work at a clothing store. Despite his initial lack of insight into Betty's lies, Jack eventually discerned her true nature. Despite his somewhat playful appearance with light brown hair, it turned out to be his natural color. Handing me a business card for the bar where he worked, Jack apologized for any inconvenience caused. He informed me that he was running late but ready to work. Expressing gratitude for bringing Betty home, I wished him a great shift, and with a smile, Jack departed. Although it would be typical to report an unauthorized person at home with a connection to Betty, I couldn't shake the intuitive feeling that Jack was trustworthy and of good character. Entering the living room, I found Betty indeed drunk and asleep. Though she was an annoyance, I covered her with a blanket to prevent her from catching a cold. Suddenly waking up, Betty struggled to articulate her words, asking, "Hey, where's Jack?" "My boyfriend with brown hair, so handsome." Boastfully laughing, she checked her phone and screamed, realizing Jack had verbally declined to date her, a fact she had forgotten in her drunken state. Confused and upset, she felt deceived, not realizing that she, in fact, had deceived Jack, making the situation unfortunate for both parties involved. As I continued cooking dinner, disregarding the commotion, Stephen and my mother-in-law returned home. Upon hearing Betty's version of the story, Stephen became furious, vowing to confront Jack and seek damages for Betty. Despite Betty's unfortunate situation, it was clear that her own actions had led to her pitiable state. Worried about causing trouble for Jack, I was confronted by Betty, accusing me of saying something to him. She showed me a text on her phone, gasping as I read, "I can't date a liar." Betty, in her intoxicated state, had revealed everything, mistakenly believing that I had betrayed her. Both Stephen and my mother-in-law confronted me, and I explained the truth about my encounter with Jack at the entrance. He was merely trying to help Betty and was leaving when we crossed paths. I emphasized that I hadn't shared anything unnecessary with him. Stephen, displeased, turned away from me, suggesting they have premium sushi for dinner. He took it upon himself to order sushi delivery, enjoying the premium feast with my mother-in-law and Betty, all on my tab, while I sat alone eating the dinner I had prepared. They laughed and enjoyed the sushi, claiming it made up for the usual terrible cooking. Despite their mockery, I felt a deep sense of emptiness, questioning if this was the family I had envisioned when I got married. Suddenly, memories of my estranged family member and Jack's kind smile flashed in my mind. A turning point arrived a few days later when, during house cleaning on my day off, Stephen presented me with a bank book. Panic set in as I saw the deposit notification. The book contained the savings I had diligently accumulated before our marriage. Stephen proudly revealed a sealed cash card and declared that he was giving the $150,000 I had saved to his parents and sister. If I refused, he insisted on divorce. These funds were intended for our future child's expenses, hoping it would create a distance between Stephen and his mother and Betty. However, Stephen dismissed my dreams, stating he prioritized his mother and sister over our potential child. Faced with the divorce papers I had prepared, Stephen eagerly filled in the necessary information. Ignoring his jubilation over the money, I packed my bags and left the house, submitting the divorce papers, which were promptly registered. Having divorced Stephen, I returned to my adoptive father's house, where I essentially lived alone due to his frequent work-related absences. Upon leaving home, I made a call to my adoptive father, urging Mary to return to our family home. Despite my rebellious nature since adolescence, I felt a surge of emotion on the verge of tears. To my surprise, my adoptive father forgave my past ingratitude, allowing me to quietly reflect on memories from my childhood. Recollections surfaced of being taken from the orphanage to my adoptive father's house, where I had once enjoyed the love of an adoptive mother who treated me as her own. However, her passing due to illness during my junior high school years triggered a period of rebellion against my adoptive father. Loneliness enveloped me as he was frequently absent due to work. In the midst of my divorce, the burden on my shoulders lifted, and I began to work diligently. It was during this time that I unexpectedly encountered Jack again. As I was leaving work, I ran into the sales department manager in the elevator hall. Expressing his kindness, he acknowledged the challenges I had faced. Noting that I looked better than before, he sincerely praised my resilience post-divorce. As I bowed and entered the elevator, the manager, in a serious tone, mentioned a bar in the sales department that had been the subject of discussion. Despite his curiosity, he felt it might be too upscale for someone like him. Inquiring about the nature of the establishment, he humbly asked me to accompany him, revealing his fascination with bars. Recognizing the manager's sincerity, I agreed to join him. The recommended bar, hidden in the basement, exuded chic decor that appealed to younger generations. The manager assured me not to be nervous as he opened the door. To my astonishment, behind the bar counter was Jack, the bartender I've encountered before my divorce. Quickly recovering from his surprise, Jack welcomed me with a smile, remarking that it had been a long time. The manager, noting the familiarity, inquired if we knew each other, mentioning the buzz in his department about a handsome man working at the bar who resembled an actor. While Jack modestly denied being an actor, he took our orders. Not accustomed to bars, I opted for Jack's recommendation, while the manager ordered a non-alcoholic cocktail. The atmosphere in the bar was serene, and the patrons refined. Jack shared that his father owned the establishment, and despite initial rebellion, he found inspiration in his father's work. As we sipped our drinks, I revealed my recent divorce. The boss, upon hearing about my ex-husband, expressed outrage, regretting the retirement allowance he had provided. Jack, with a smile, prepared a mint soda for me, observing my forced smile and the unexpected turn of events. He generously offered the Minnesota to the boss for free, which helped calm him down a bit. As we enjoyed our drinks, the boss, with genuine curiosity, asked Jack if he sent drinks from other customers as seen in dramas. Jack laughed cheerfully, dismissing it as an urban legend and stating he had never done such a thing. Amidst the pleasant time at the bar, my phone suddenly rang. Though initially considering stepping outside, Jack reassured me that it was okay to answer the call. To my annoyance, it turned out to be Stephen, my ex-husband from whom I had divorced. Despite the interruption to the fun gathering, I answered due to the persistent calls. Stephen loudly complained about not being able to withdraw money, stating that the balance was zero. I explained that I had transferred the deposit to another account and kept a dummy passbook to prevent theft. The real one, with the $200,000, was safely hidden. Steven was dumbfounded when I revealed this information. Meanwhile, he, my former mother-in-law, and Betty were overseas, attempting to dip into the dummy account for a luxurious time. Frustrated by their inability to withdraw, Steven threatened me to send all my assets immediately. Unfazed, I handed over the dummy passbook and gave up the house in the property division. I declared that I no longer knew anything about it. In the meantime, Jack borrowed my phone and ruthlessly demanded payment from Steven for a tab of $5,000 for his sister's drinks. After conveying the message, Jack returned my phone, suggesting Steven work hard for his beloved mother and sister. I hung up the call, and Jack, with a smile, offered me a cocktail on the house, an Arthur ginger ale. The boss and I toasted to the refreshing turn of events, reveling in Steven's miserable fate. Subsequently, Steven found himself in a deepening spiral of debt. In a foreign hotel, a kind gentleman, well-versed in finance, approached him, offering a loan. Steven, oblivious to the looming interest, accepted, resulting in a debt that skyrocketed to $600,000. To repay the loan, the gentleman even arranged a job for him, and now Steven is working on a fishing boat, his whereabouts unknown. Betty and my mother-in-law, obligated to repay their debts, sold their house and currently reside in a small apartment, working tirelessly except for sleeping. Back at my parents' home, I chatted with my foster father, a figure well connected in the financial industry, who strategically played a role in pitching my ex-husband into dire straits. It turned out that the overseas family trip was funded by selling all the jewelry Steven had obtained from my parting gift. Reflecting on the past, I remembered my foster father's advice when I got married, to protect one thing. He strictly instructed me to leave the jewelry and the house in the event of a divorce, a wisdom that had proven to be invaluable. Dad, your audacity always leaves me in awe. My foster father, having connections with the precious metal buyer Steven used to sell my jewelry, had timely information that Steven, the one who sold my possessions, was headed overseas. Your appearance in front of Steven was impeccable, unraveling everything. I also have my sources, and I'm aware that you've developed a camaraderie with the young bartender. I couldn't help but burst into laughter at his revelation. Amid Steven's uproar, the manager took a liking to Jack and brought other colleagues to the bar. That's when my boss, perhaps sensing a connection, asked Jack if he had someone he was interested in here. Under the manager's leading question, Jack looked at me and explained that, at 25, he had harbored one-sided feelings for me since we first met. Despite Jack being self-deprecating about his perceived immaturity, the manager insisted that he was a great guy and urged him to express his feelings. I attempted to halt the manager's momentum, but it was too late. Jack confessed his feelings to me, saying he liked me and expressing a desire for us to be together. In the midst of this unexpected turn of events, I found myself with a 25-year-old boyfriend. The manager, overjoyed, declared himself my wingman. I had contemplated informing my foster father later, but he somehow discovered that I went to Jack's bar. He praised Jack as a very nice young man, noting the stark contrast with my disrespectful ex-husband. Dad, you're moving too fast, but my foster father has always been a fierce advocate for me. Despite his extreme nature, when it comes to dealing with those who disrespect me, he remains a kind father. I am truly grateful to be his daughter. When I shared my feelings and news with a smile, he reciprocated with a smile. I plan to take a break and visit the hot springs with my dear foster father, and Jack will be joining us. I've promised Jack that we'll get married soon, and he plans to greet my foster father formally. I'm confident that my father and Jack will form a wonderful family. Reporting this to my father, he smiled and congratulated me, expressing his joy for this new chapter in my life.